Greetings and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. So over this next few weeks, we're going to be looking at this book called The Shack. Many of you have probably read it, probably have heard about it. It's was kind of a pretty obscure book. I wasn't sure if anyone would ever have heard of it. Only sold something around like 10, 12, 20 million copies. They've also made a movie about it. So there's been kind of a lot has gone on with it now. I have to admit, though, when it first came out, I was a little bit skeptical. Mostly because I have a tendency to be a little bit skeptical of things like that, of books like that, especially Christian books that they come out and they become wildly popular, and I always have my doubts about, is this more than pop theology, or is there something more to it? Is there some depth to it? And most of the time, I don't think there's a lot of depth there, but eventually, I was convinced that I needed to read this. Someone kept saying, "You should read it. You should read it. You should read it." I'm like, no. And then I learned better and decided, no, I probably should read it. So after a little bit of convincing, I read it. Then, as I got into it, it didn't take me very long before I realized, I really should have read this years ago. Because every once in a while, for all of the other stuff that comes out, there are books like The Shack that come out that help us to better understand not just our relationship with God, but also what it takes to work through the struggles that we face in life. And that's what we see here. We see the story of a man who is faced with struggles that we can only imagine, and how he has to find how he comes to finding healing and working through those things. As we look at this story, there was, after it came out, after it became fairly popular, the author, Paul Young, calls this guy up. His name's Baxter Kruger, and says, I need you to write I would like for you to write a book that kind of goes more in depth about some of the themes that we go through in the book. And he said he would do it. And one of the things that Baxter does is that he points out this concept that becomes kind of fundamental to the story as we read it, and that's the inside world. The inside world is this place where we go to bury things. Everyone has a little bit of this, a little bit of things that you don't want to share with anyone else, a little bit of things that even maybe you're trying to hide from yourself, a little bit of things that you just want to kind of keep covered up. Now, some folks, though, their inside world is big. They have lots of things that they are trying to deal with and struggle with and trying to figure out, but they want to keep that buried as much as possible. And Baxter says, this inside world whispers to us all the time. It whispers things that we might be saying to ourselves. I am not all right. I am not good, not worthy, not important, not lovable, not human. And he says that haunts every single moment of life. How does a child or anyone cope with an inner world of such anguish? And he says no one can deal with that. This is what that inner world does. This is what it builds. It is full of all of those things that we try and keep contained, but we try and bury. He goes on to say that, a lot of times we try to kind of self-medicate our way around that, so we don't have to deal with that inner world. So we do all sorts of things. And he says we replace statements that, in response to this kind of thing, where we would say, no, I am not these things. I am not what you are trying to portray me as. Instead, because we don't feel like we can say that, we say other things to try and cover that up. We say, if I can just get married and have children, or if I can just get that job or promotion, that money, that car, that house, that relationship, and so on and so forth. The list of things can go on and on from there that we use to kind of bury that inside world, that we used to kind of bury all those things and cover it up. And he says it can lead to other things. It can lead to some folks. We begin to engage in behaviors where we just kind of check out from the rest of the world around us. You ever have work with folks that are struggling through especially addictions and that sort of things, oftentimes that's what they're doing. They are checking out from everything else because there is so much stuff there they don't want to deal with. And so they just want to kind of let go of all of that. Other folks do that by getting really super busy. That if you can just keep going, just keep active, then you can keep that covered up. Other folks, this one is my favorite, they deflect. They deflect and they say, well, I know that I'm going through this. I know that this is something that I am dealing with, but I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to say, well, don't look at those other people over there, but they're dealing with this. They are, they're getting in trouble because of this. They don't want to deal with it themselves, but they're more than happy to point that out in other people until it comes back and it comes out that, no, they're dealing with the same thing. But they're just trying to hide it by pointing it out in others, so that maybe folks don't look at them. The Shack is about our main character, Mackenzie Allen Phillips. Everyone calls him Mac. Whose inside world has taken over his life, whose inside world is eating him up from the inside out. It's affecting not just him, but it's affecting his family that's around him. Now, for good reason, though. Mac's life had not ever been easy. In his childhood, he dealt with things that most people don't ever have to deal with. It caused him to grow up quick, but he got through that. He dealt with that. By the time we pick up his story, for the most part, he is well-adjusted. He is married. He's in a very stable and good relationship with his wife. He's got kids. He's got a good job. He's made it there. He hasn't dealt with all of that stuff, but he's kind of gotten through that. Up until the point when the next event happens. Now, if you haven't read the books, I am going to be sharing parts of the story as we go. So, I'm going to give away some spoilers here for how the story takes place. But the next big thing that happens that sets in motion the events that lead Mac to the Shack are that he is taking his kids on a camping trip. And they go out and they have a great time, but on one day, some other things happen, and he, loses sight of his daughter for just not very long, but that was all that was needed. His daughter is kidnapped and taken away, and is presumed to have died. They never found her at the first part of the story. They haven't found her. All they found of her was in this old, dilapidated, rundown shack. They found the dress that she had been wearing that day. And this breaks Mac. They are trying to deal with this. He is trying to deal with this, and he doesn't know what to do. And so time goes on, and the next time we pick this up, it's now winter. And his family had been off someplace, but they're up in the northwest as they had a big storm come through and dumped a lot of snow on everyone. And so they aren't getting home, and he is at home. He's trying to take care of things, and he looks over and he sees in his mailbox, there's a note. Now, he doesn't know who put it there because he hadn't seen it before, and there are no tracks in the snow around it to show where anyone had been there, but there's this note in this mailbox, and he goes to open it up, and he looks at this note, and it says, Mackenzie, it's been a while. I've missed you. I'll be at the Shack next weekend if you want to get together, and it's signed Papa. Now, Mac is completely and totally unsure of what to do with this. Because the Shack is the last place that he wants to go. That is the place that haunts his nightmares, it haunts his dreams. It is the place that is in the middle of his inside world that he is trying so very hard not to deal with and not very well. It is the place where he doesn't even want to think about. And it's signed Papa. Now you got to know that his wife is a very deeply religious, has a very deep faith, and when she prays and when she talks to God, she calls him Papa. So Mac is sitting there and he is dealing with this, and he doesn't know what to make of this note and of the things that it says and what it wants him to do. And so he goes through a process of trying to figure this out, and eventually it leads him up to that place where he doesn't want to be. Excuse me. He doesn't want to be up in that shack, and he is now trying to figure out and understand because he knows that he is not well. He knows that it is hurting his family, but he doesn't know how to fix it. And so part of him is hoping that maybe he'll find something up there. So he goes up to the shack. This is what God does. God speaks in ways, you've heard me say this before, God speaks in ways so that we'll hear, so that we'll understand. Now, the other part of it that I haven't ever said before is that sometimes God speaks to us in ways that we are forced to hear because otherwise we just ignore him. Sometimes we have really good selective hearing when it comes to what God is saying around us because we don't want to deal with that. We don't want to listen to that. We don't want to do that. And so God speaks in a way that forces us to confront what we don't want to confront. And that's what we're seeing this morning, even in our Bible story. Talking with the kids earlier, telling the story of Elijah, that he is a great prophet. And he is. He was the greatest prophet in the Old Testament. But he got scared. He performed a great feat. If you ever get a chance to go back to before this in 1 Kings and read the story of what it is that Elijah does, I mean, it is, you want to talk about someone just doing something and laying the smack down on some people. This is what Elijah is doing. He had called out the priest of this other religion and pointed out just how big of frauds they were in the most spectacular way possible. But unfortunately for him, the one really important person in that story that wasn't there was Queen Jezebel. She hears about it. She finds out what he did. And she is coming back and she is ready to take out her revenge on Elijah. Elijah gets scared, and so he runs. Now, as Elijah is running, though, this voice comes and speaks to him and says, Elijah, I want you to go up onto this mountain. And Elijah says, he figures out that this is God talking. He says, you don't understand what I'm doing. I am running away from something. Where I'm going doesn't matter. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just trying to get away from this. And the voice says, no. Make sure you drink some water, eat some food, get some sleep, because I've got a destination for you to go. Now the choice Elijah has there is he can go anywhere else but that mountain. But that was the note that Elijah got. And Elijah can't stay away from there. He's got to go and find out what is there, because maybe, just maybe, there's that little bit of hope that that will be what he needs, is to get to that place. He gets there, he goes up to the mountain, and that voice again says, I'm going to come by where you are. He's kind of hiding out in a cave. And so then we see a great wind, we see an earthquake, we see a fire come by. If we were writing the story, that's where we would say God was, in the great, big, powerful acts of nature, because, God is big and powerful. That's what we expect. But we're told God isn't there in many of those places. Instead, we hear this thin whisper that comes to him, that leads Elijah outside of that cave. Because that's where God is, in that small, tiny voice. But that's what Elijah needed in order to hear. And that voice says to him when he gets up to that cave entrance, why are you here, Elijah? Why are you here? And that's when Elijah begins to kind of unburden himself of his worry, of his concern, of his anger, of his frustration, over the things that were going on, over what was going to happen, over what might have happened to him if he goes back. That's where he lets that out. He doesn't really know why he's there, but why he's there is to find the healing that he needed, to find the strength and the support that he needed so that he could go back and he could do that work that he was so very good at. And he got just what it was that he needed so that he could go back, so that he could go back and do that work once again. For Mac, God knows that he is hurting. That's the one thing one of the things that I love about this book is that it does not try to hide away how much Mac is hurting and what that is doing to him. But also points out that God knows that God has known that that is not at all a secret. God knows that Mac is hurting. And out of God's love for Mac, wants him to find healing. But in order for Mac to do that, it's got to take him back to the last place that he ever wants to go. It's got to take him back to the shack. It's got to get him up to that side of the mountain so that he can find that healing that he needs, so he can finally listen in the way that he'll hear, so that he will hear God's voice and find that healing. It wasn't easy for him to do. It wasn't easy for Elijah to do that. In fact, the author of the book, we'll talk more about his story later, he had his own troubles that led him to writing this book in the first place. You know, it's not easy to do that thing, to do that and to go and to confront that hidden inside world that we try to keep buried under everything. But Mac goes up there. He gets up to that shack and he gets up there. He doesn't know what to expect, but what he finds is it is the same old, rundown, dilapidated place that it was the last time he was there. And this is when everything comes crushing down around him. His inside world starts to come out, and he is showing all of his anger, all of his frustration. He's not hiding any of that back anymore. And he had taken a gun with him because he didn't know what he was going to find, and might need to confront someone up there. And he came about that close to using it on himself, but got distracted for a moment. And so then he gets up and he leaves, middle of winter, he leaves that shack and there's snow all over on the grounds, and he is done with that note, he is done with that shack, and he is done with God in that moment. But then he gets turned around and things begin to change. Things begin to change around him. All of a sudden, it's no longer cold in the deep and dark of winter, and the shack no longer looks like this rundown dump that it had before, but it looks good, it looks well maintained, it looks like people are living there. And so he walks back into the door of that shack, and the first person that he sees in there's three people in there. The first person that he sees is this African-American woman who wraps him up in the biggest bear hug that you have ever seen and literally lifts him up off the ground. And the rest of that part of the story says, and all the while she was shouting his name, Mackenzie Allen Phillips, with the ardor of someone seeing a long-lost and deeply loved relative. She finally set him back on earth and with her hands on his shoulders pushed him back as if to get a good look at him. Mac, look at you, she fairly exploded. Here you are and so grown up. I have really been looking forward to seeing you face to face. It is so wonderful to have you here with us. My, how I do love you. And with that, she wrapped herself around him again. Now, Mac has figured out, or he thinks he's figured out who this is, and it is still confusing him like you wouldn't believe. He does not know how to process all of this, which is part of the reason why God appeared to him like this, because now he is off kilter. He's a little bit confused, but he is ready to hear and listen, and more importantly, he's beginning to feel something important. Because this woman who wrapped him up in that great big bear hug, he figures out is Papa. You can understand the confusion at this point. And so that woman is Papa, and she is giving to him the one thing that he needed in that moment. It's not the solution to all of his problems. In fact, another one of the things I love about this book is that it asks the hard questions, and it doesn't give you easy answers. It doesn't give the answers that we sometimes hear that really don't help anything, but lets us kind of struggle through that for a while it works on building those answers up and putting all those pieces together. But this was the start of Mac's healing. He had to get to the shack to start that healing so that he could feel this one important thing, and that was Papa's love for him. Love for him that he didn't have to do anything to get. He didn't have to fill out any sort of requirements or application to get. It was just already there for no other reason than that's just what God does. God loves. It loves his children. That was all that was needed. And Mac begins to feel that pure, undiluted, overwhelming, and complete love that he had never felt before. It wasn't enough to get him through all of his problems, but it was enough to get him started and ready to listen and to hear what God was trying to say. Now, in a couple of weeks on February 4th, we're going to stay after church that day about 12:30, and we're going to, since the movie has come out, I've got a copy of it. We'll watch the movie. After church that day. Bring any sorts of movie snacks that you want to bring: popcorn, nachos, pizza. Some weird people like pickles to eat at movies. I don't know. That's a weird thing that I don't get. And we'll have some other stuff that we'll bring along with it, and we'll watch kind of how this movie takes shape, and we'll maybe talk about different parts of it as we go. And I invite you to come and share in that time and watch that movie together. But for now, we do this. We go from here knowing that we don't have to have all the answers, knowing that we don't have to be the one that can supply all the right things, the easy and the pat responses when folks are hurting and suffering. But what we can do is just the exact same thing that God does for back and God does for all of us. When we find those moments when our inside world is coming out and it's threatening everything else around us, we can share that pure, undiluted, overwhelming, complete love that comes from God. That is love that we can share. Sometimes it's just with ourselves. We need to remember that. Other times it's that same love that we can share with others and says, we don't have to fix all this now. Let's start here. God's love is not the place where things end. God's love is the place where things begin. And so in turn, we can take that love out and share with others. We can. So let us go and do that. Let us go and share that love, even if that's only the first step in a longer journey that we help folks take. And share that same love that Papa gives to us, and do that in Papa's name, in Jesus' name, and through the work of the Holy Spirit.